Hi, hello, and welcome again, everybody, to another episode of Natural Juan and the second episode of A Fisherman's Tale. Again, this is a story taking place in the AAA universe, or the Anomalous Artifacts Agency. This is a shared universe that contains dark or mature superhero stories along with eldritch horrors reminiscent of the works of H.P. Lovecraft and Junji Ito. I will have this in an ongoing series of stories on Wattpad, so stay tuned for that if you want to see more content like this. Anyway, before we start, shout out to Mr. Jonathan Green, my patron in Patreon. So now, with all that out of the way, let us take another dive into the Fisherman's Tale. "Leo!" I shouted into the evening as my son continued to scream. "Leo!" I burst through the hut's door and ran directly to my son's room, where I found him on the floor, his blanket undone, his clothes in disarray, and his marred skin exposed. "They're coming, father," he shouted, staring blankly at me. "The men from the boats are coming." Now, Leo," I said, trying to get him up from the floor. "You were just having a bad dream." "No, father, they're coming for me," my son went on. "They're going to take Rhea and the others away." Just then, unexpected help came when some of my neighbors, Esther and Abraham, entered my home to placate my son and get him back into bed. Esther and Abraham were quite old, but still had a bit of strength left in them. Both of them were grandparents, and their children and grandchildren now lived elsewhere. They were good and reliable friends who helped out my wife when they were young and helped babysit my kids after she died. I ended up sharing a meal with the old couple and talked about some of the things that had been going on up to now. "So you found yourself a most generous customer, Abraham said. "Well, lucky you. The same cannot be said about what's happening to the rest of us here, though. The damned Unos family is putting something in the water that's killing all the fish." "Huh?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said," Abraham said. "I don't know what they're guarding out there in the Philippine Sea, but it's killing all the fish in the immediate area real fast. And I mean fast. Worse, they won't let anyone close to what's really going on over there. They got armed guards out there who are likely to shoot anybody that isn't one of them that gets too close." "Armed guards?" My eyes widened at that. "Have you reported this?" Abraham sighed. It was the sigh of resignation. It was a sigh that he had given up. "Yes, we reported it to the Coast Guard, but you know how it is. The Unos family has the mayor and the Coast Guard squarely in their pocket. They're not going to do anything, and you probably know that already." He was right. The Unoses have been causing problem after problem for us and people in neighboring islands since the 1950s, if my grandfather's stories are to be believed. They were a wealthy family that behaved like one of those noble families in the stories, acting like they owned the islands we lived on. And technically, they did. They did whatever they wanted to. When someone caught the eye of one of the Unoses, they were abducted, and next thing you know, they were part of the family. That said, the family of the abducted never get to see them again, and the cops won't do anything about it. When someone angers the Unos family, it doesn't take long for that someone's house to burn down under mysterious circumstances. We never really find out who actually starts the fire, and the Coast Guard doesn't dare touch the Unoses. And finally, when the Unos family don't want anyone messing with what they consider their property, even if it's supposed to belong to the general public, they will lay claim to it and get their private goons to drive off anyone who wants to use or come near it. The mayor, despite all the power afforded to them, can do nothing about this. "Abraham," I then said calmly, "do you really think the Unos family have anything to do with—" But I didn't finish. "The disappearance of the children?" the old man finished for me. "Possibly. Now I can't be sure, but the Unoses have been involved in all kinds of things already. I wouldn't put it past them to be involved in kidnapping as well." The next day, it continued raining, and the wind continued to howl all around the beach, but I kept my end of the bargain and waited for the woman who gave me the pearls to return. And she did. Even Even as the monsoon weather raged all around us, I saw her approaching quite a ways away because of her sheer size. What was most curious of all, though, was that what she wore. She wore a green two-piece bikini despite the fact that the wind and rain was literally tearing up the beach. More curious still was that strapped to one of her long and toned thighs was what was probably a large knife in a scabbard. She carried with her a backpack, a large thermos, and a hefty cooler. The woman walked with confidence, even as the wind pelted her with rain and sand, tousling her long red hair which flapped against the wind almost like a flag or a flame. There I sat in my boat, enveloped in my bright yellow raincoat and life jacket, dumbfounded at the sight of a scantily clad, beautiful woman with a wicked weapon secured to one of her thighs. I snapped out of it and stood to help her with her luggage. I discovered, much to my surprise and disbelief, that they were quite heavy. When we reached the boat, I loaded her luggage into my vessel. After the thermos, I nearly fell over with the sheer weight of the backpack. With that done, I looked at the large cooler she carried and wondered how heavy it would be. However, instead of letting me carry it into the boat, she did it herself, and I felt the boat sink just a little more at the combined weight of the woman and the cooler. When she placed the cooler on the deck of my boat, there was an audible thud, and I was momentarily afraid that its sheer weight would sink us. "I see that you did not disappoint," she said, as she took her place at the prow of the boat. "I will see to it that you are paid well for your troubles, and there will be even more when we complete our journey." She then gave me a drawstring purse like the one I saw her carry before, but this was smaller. I looked inside and was surprised to find 10 pearls. She had doubled the amount she had given me before. For the first 5 pearls alone, she could have had me take her anywhere, but this? "So, where to?" I asked. "I will give you directions," she said simply, "and you will take me there." She turned to face the sea, her full weight pressing down on my vessel's structure. She walked to the prow of the boat and stood there, facing the vast, raging ocean and giving me a good view of her back muscles. I wondered how much time this woman spent exercising to have gotten such a powerful and admirable physique. That said, I found her body to be too intimidating to be interested in her. "Sounds fair," I said, though I was doubtful. "May I ask for my employer's name, then?" "My name is Katja," she said. "Katja Goldbrandsen." "Katja?" I asked, trying to imitate her pronunciation. "No," she said. "It is Katja with a J, not with the one with a Y. I'm from Denmark." I nodded at that. She was a foreigner after all. Of course, I would find out later that she was more foreign than that. And so we went forth, the motor of my boat chugging along the churning waves of the sea, with Katja at the prow, shouting directions at me to go left or right. We went into the raging sea as rain and waves pelted us like bullets. While I kept my head down, as water battered and pummeled me, Katja stood at the prow of my boat, resolute against seawater and rainwater. Then, as I looked around us, I saw that we were being followed, or rather, that there were 2 large creatures in the water that were keeping up with the boat. One was the enormous silhouette of what could only be a hammerhead shark, and the other had the pulpy appearance of a colossal octopus. "Don't be afraid," Katja said when she saw that I noticed them. "They're friends." I was still worried, but I decided to trust the foreigner. Truth be told, after what had happened earlier to my son, I didn't really care anymore. Sure, there were just 2 of us on a flimsy boat in the middle of the sea under a stormy sky, but the chance to help my son took precedence. If we made it back, perhaps I could finally get my son the correct medical attention he needed. I put aside all my fear and put faith in the woman at the front of my boat who seemed like a godsend. And then, that was when I noticed something worse than the shark and octopus following us. To one side of the boat was another boat, a good distance away from us. I don't think the people on that boat noticed us yet, but it was very easy to spot them. I don't think the people on that boat noticed us yet, but it was very easy to spot them. Katja motioned for us to stop, and I stopped the outboard motor immediately. I took from among my things something a previous tourist had gifted to me, what I saw chilled me to the bone and awakened in me a deep-seated anger. There were about 4 adults on the boat, all covered in white raincoats, and about 5 children who were tied together around one of the boat's masts. The people in raincoats were armed with what could only be submachine guns, which were secured to them by shoulder straps. They all seemed to be arguing about something, with some of them gripping their guns while others pointing at the children tied between them. From what I could see, the children cried and sobbed as the adults gestured towards them. I tried to get a better view of the boat and saw that it was one of those owned by the Unos family based on its color and markings. What made their boat most conspicuous, though, was that there was a torch atop their boat. It wasn't too dark to see yet, but they nonetheless kept a burning torch above their vessel. I then turned my sights to the torch and suddenly found myself lost in looking at the flame. It was no ordinary flame, not this one. It was a fire of many colors, from blue to green to red and many more. As the flame danced and flickered, I found I could not look away from it, and then it started. I started hearing voices in my head. I heard the voice of my daughter, crying desperately for help wherever she was. I heard the voice of my son, sobbing, screaming, and then laughing in madness. I heard the voice of my long-dead wife, whispering to me how pathetic I was and how I failed our children. Then the images came. But that stopped when a hand with a webbing of skin between the fingers covered my binoculars. "Don't look at the fire," Katya said urgently. "Don't let it see you." Then I found the strength to turn and saw that my companion had changed. She was still her, a tall, beautiful, and muscular woman with red hair that was like fire and eyes as blue as the ocean. What had changed, though, was that she now had ribbed fins on her forearms and calves and gills that were like a shark's on her neck. When she spoke, I saw that her teeth were pointed and triangular, not unlike those found in sharks. Katya then drew out her long, serrated knife, and I backed away instinctively. "I will go to the other boat," she said, gesturing with her wicked weapon. "Do not leave, and whatever you do not look at the fire." I nodded, and, just like that, she leaped into the waters beneath the boat. I raised my binoculars again to track her progress, and didn't take all that long for her to reach the boat. Right behind her, I saw the silhouette of the hammerhead shark that was shadowing us earlier. It followed her like a loyal dog. Sneakily, like some commando from an action movie, Katya swam up to the other boat, and, when one of the armed men was close enough, jumped clear of the water and held the knife to the man's throat. She was gesturing to the other men aboard the boat, and, from what I could tell, she seemed to be telling them to lower their weapons. The children, tied to the mainmast, only looked at the woman with silent wonder, momentarily distracted from their fear. The remaining 3 men did not surrender, however, and instead opened fire on Katya. In order to protect herself, Katya used the body of the armed man she held as a shield, preventing her from taking any of the others' bullets. While I didn't like the gesture, I doubt Katya had any other choice aside from getting riddled with bullets herself, and I doubt any of the armed men spared any kind of sympathy for their own, considering how callous they were handling their firearms. I don't know how the next thing happened, but a large wave suddenly slammed the boat the men were on, knocking 2 of them off board and snuffing out the torch atop the vessel. For some reason I couldn't understand at the time, that made the scene less tense and terrifying. I would learn more about this later on, but I was transfixed by what was happening aboard the boat. The one man who was not swept away by the waves simply jumped off in fear as Katya approached him, knife drawn. While she was certainly attractive, her knife looked real mean, based on the way she looked now. She would have easily terrified or at least unsettled some of the tougher men I know. The man who jumped off was far from safe, however, as the hammerhead shark that followed us soon came upon him and devoured him alive. Katya then turned toward me, knowing that I could probably see her from afar, and gestured for me to bring the boat closer. When the boats were together, Katya quickly got to cutting the children free. She brought the children aboard my boat and told me to tell the children that we would be taking them back home. The foreigner then told me to take my boat as far away as I could from the boat used by the kidnappers and wait for her to come back. And I did. Again, I watched her using my binoculars, and I discovered that she was indeed something supernatural. An anomaly, as you put it. It was then I saw that she must have had some sort of control over the seawater, as she suddenly created a whirlpool that quickly sank the boat to the depths of the ocean. And it wasn't long before she returned to the boat as well, her ribbed fins and gills having disappeared. I wondered at the time if I just hallucinated it all. I would find out later, though, that they were real and that she was truly something more than human. She opened the backpack she carried and was surprised to see that she carried a first aid kit inside it. Katya quickly got to work examining the children to see if any of them were hurt, and using the contents of the kit to patch up any wounds or bruises they might have sustained. I helped, as best I could, and asked the children what happened to them. The children told us that they were taken by the white-cloaked men as they played on the beach. This brought back memories of both my missing daughter and afflicted son, and soon realized the men Katya fought were the same ones my children encountered years ago, or were at least associated with them. Rage and fury grew in my heart as I guided the boat back to shore, and the children told us what had happened to them. They had been playing on the beach when the 4 armed men approached them. One of them carried a torch that had the same kind of fire that burned at the top of their boat. At first I thought it must be some kind of chemical fire that created a gas that somehow hypnotized the children and anyone who inhaled it. However, I would only realize later on that it was something that was much worse. As the children told their tale, they confirmed a number of theories I had about what was going on. The men were indeed members, or at least servants, of the Unos family. They had also been kidnapping kids for years, or perhaps even decades now. Lastly, they confirmed a theory only I and old Abraham had, that they were some kind of cult. According to the children we had rescued, the men talked about feeding them to the fire. They seemed to worship the fire, believing it to be a god or a part of a god, as they thought that its light was what was guiding them. The reason they stopped in the water in the first place was because the fire was weakening, and they argued over sacrificing one of the children to it to bolster its strength. However, as the children would describe, there was nothing holy or godly about the fire. Instead, it felt cold, which I found most strange, and while it shed light, its light was far from comforting. The children said they felt afraid and sometimes saw scary things whenever they tried to look at the fire. Of course, at that point in time, I didn't believe the fire to be anything but a strange chemical fire. I wouldn't change my mind about it until later. We arrived at our island, and instead of going to the authorities, whom I didn't trust one bit, I took them straight to our village. Abraham and Esther were there, surprised at the sight of the children and what they had to tell. They listened on in horror at what they heard. Fully knowing what had happened, Esther told us that she has friends both in the DSWD, the people who take care of issues regarding child abuse, and the National Bureau of Investigation. She would be calling them tonight along with her children, who also knew authority figures in Manila, who would be willing to help. In due time, they would arrive to confront the Unos family and unravel the extent of their evil. This last, we would discover, was more horrible than we anticipated, and, even now, I wish I didn't have to see for myself what the Unos family had become. The families of the children we rescued were very thankful to me, and I pointed out that it was really Katya who did most of the work. That said, they were quite wary of the tall foreign woman, but Katya didn't seem to mind. After we told our story and made sure the children would be safe, I brought Katya to my home where I hoped that some of my late wife's clothing would still be around and fit the woman. After all, a green two-piece bikini probably wasn't appropriate for the situation. As we entered my hut, however, my son uttered a long and terrifying groan that shook me to my core.